I'm very pleased to have listened to the presentation from the World Bank and Father and good luck to everyone. You know, when I was congressman, 1998 to 2004, every year I would read the report of the World Bank. And especially in my first term, because I was in the opposition. I was in the minority. And the World Bank report had a very good study on the housing problems then. In 1998, the National Home Mortgage Finance Corporation. It was this thick and of course very informative. And every year since that time, I would be reading the report. It's a very good summary, very good, I would say, very clearly narrates the reform agenda that has to be implemented. In my second term, I was already part of the majority. And it was when GMA was already president. The economic reform measures. And as chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee, we used many of the World Bank reports to pursue and put in place many of the economic reform measures that were agreed by the and post. The anti-money laundering law was something that the World Bank has been pushing, and many other reforms, no? Securities Regulations Act, the Corporate Rehabilitation Act. This was an attempt to consolidate and come up with a clear body of laws and statutes in an integrated, consolidated way. Matters relating to insolvency, corporate rehabilitation, because before that, we had the insolvency law, which was a 1906 law, patterned after the law of Delaware, and then later, during the time of Marcos, he issued decrees. So it was very difficult, very difficult. And the SEC was, because of the limited legislation, the SEC virtually had wide discretion. But anyway, the intention of that was to precisely define the legislative, the regulatory framework as far as corporate rehabilitations are concerned. So sa awa ng Diyos, whenever there would be reversals given the economic cycle, at least you have regulatory parameters that have been well placed. Now, speaking about reacting to the report, you know, I looked at the slowdown of the investment, and one explanation is that it was an election year, so there was this election ban, and certainly everybody was affected. You could not implement infrastructure projects unless you are given a special clearance by the COMELEC. And I think it really have affected the growth momentum, the investment momentum that the government had tried to push forward or sustain after the assumption of the president in 2016. At the local level, you know, this is from a local perspective. Public investments are certainly very, very important. And what because the fundamentals, the basic needs, if not addressed, would create social problems that would certainly be harder to control or harder to manage. So, what are these priority areas of public investment? As far as I'm concerned, I have focused on the agenda called Prime Hub, PRIMEHAT. P for poverty alleviation and peace and order. R for resettlement and revenue generation. I for infrastructure investments. M for metropolization. E for environment and education. H for hospital and health services. A for agricultural productivity, and T for tourism, traffic, and teamwork. Now, of course, there are many other areas not included, but these are the basics. And talking about the most basic, I would say education and health. And I'll tell you a story. When I decided, because I was in the private sector for 20 years, when I decided, tinamaan na ng virus, to join public service, I consulted one relative who had made a name for himself in Manila, si Tony Mercado. He was the one who donated its monument. And he was from Baligasag, my hometown, and a relative also. And a neighbor, older by 15 years at least. No? So I consulted him. We were not friends, but we knew each other. So I visited him. He was in advertising, yung basic niya to. So I told him, I want to go into public service. And then he told me, you list down the things that you want to do, and then you come back. List them down in cryptic form, and then you come back and let's discuss. So I came back with a 2-page, all in one line per deliverable that I wanted to do. So I gave the 2-page paper to him, and he read it, and then he laughed, he smiled, and then he said, you just pick two. You just pick two, and focus on the two. Public service is advertising. You have to dedicate yourself to two areas so that the people will know, will get to understand you. And they know what they want by voting for you. Yun ang advice niya. So I went through it. And he did not anymore talk to me. In the final analysis, because I picked three, I disobeyed him. I picked education, health, and jobs. But then in the end, now after more than 20 years, I realized that education and health really are the key. And I agree with the observation kanina ni Ma'am Serenas, no? And education of our chairman of the Economic Society. Ang labor market really is the key. At least from our perspective sa local, labi na sa local and the academic. And of course, we now have in place our budget for 7.5 billion. We're waiting for DBM's approval, and we expect that to come by either late February or mid-March. And then in the meantime, we are already, we're still, by the way, we're still implementing to this day projects that were planned in 2019. And ganun ka bagal ang procurement process, implementation, and there are no shortcuts. Otherwise, Lizard explained. So the process and the ease of doing business, where I would even consider ourselves lucky. We have this Ma'am Nympha Albania, my teacher here in Xavier, in mathematics, father. Pero we avoided her. But we could not. LP, I think, studied under her, but that's why LP is good. But anyway, itong USAID program, ease of doing business is very much a key part of that program. And Cagayan de Oro has benefited from that. The project, the called Invest, started way back in 2013. And now we're under another project, also with the USAID. So, thanks God, we're doing okay. I wish we could do more, but actually, you have to have a balance, a very difficult balance. You want to do more, but of course you know that if you want to do more than what you can do, you'll have to generate more funds. And from whom will the funds come? Now, over my last 6 years, I have not imposed new taxes. I have not raised the tax rates, and people are still complaining. But, and I have received 2 letters already from the Department of Finance, Sunny Dominguez, telling me that I should adjust the assessed value already of the real estate. And I know that this is one area that, of course, and this is, I hope, something that perhaps World Bank can help. How do you change the people's perspective? No, lahat tayo galit sa tax. Lahat tayo galit sa tax. And yet, all the investments that the government does come from the tax. Although, of course, you have this corruption issue and things like that, the spillage, no? But that's the bottom line. The ability, the national government, and this is one area na I hope our economic students would understand. The national level, the government can operate under a fiscal deficit situation. What does that mean? They can borrow to finance the projects. They can borrow anytime. There is a national treasury that does the borrowing every day. The government securities, etc., etc. On the part of the local level, you cannot spend what you do not have. You can borrow, but it's a long process, so you can spend only that which you are able to generate. So if you generate less, then don't expect to spend more. So, in fact, the one way of looking at how the LGU is run is by looking at the budget. How much is the budget of that LGU? You know, highly urbanized cities, in Metro Manila, their budget is already in double-digit, billions. Makati, Quezon City, Manila, already reaching 20 billion. Ang sa ato, 7.5 billion. But that is even viewed by many as quite ambitious. So, I guess the message that I want to convey is, especially sa ato mga estudyante, begin to aim higher. Let's be ambitious. But of course, we have to be determined to achieve our ambition. Thank you.